But our case discussions and the supervision is in Spanish, and that promotes the confidence within our students to use Spanish, and to learn Spanish and to kind of apply the more technical use of Spanish in our profession. The observational that Sandy was talking about, where students get a chance to observe each other and get direct feedback, direct supervision, is another aspect of it. So there's several components of our program that we want to share with the professional community.
Well, something that's interesting me, because let's say that me as a Caucasian, for instance, I learned what I think is perfect Spanish, and would I still make a good therapist, because I don't have like the background that you might need to have the understanding to deal with a lot of these family issues? Is that
well, I think those when you had asked about the uniqueness of the Latino program, that I think that applies to the training as well. That we do, I think we've shifted some of what we see at times in the field from using translators or using people that know a little bit, or even people that grew up speaking Spanish, let's say, fluently, but they really haven't used it in a clinical context. So what happens with this program is that we ask that they have at least conversational Spanish. And what happens is that part of the uniqueness of this model is that we have what's called a co-therapist. So what we do is we have two therapists in the room, one of them at times having more expertise either in the language or in just client care. And as you match them up, the level of Spanish increases, and just being in the room with the client, that they're able to just really increase their skills.
So the client doesn't feel uncomfortable with that, having two people there, and
that has not been our experience.
Because again, when you really think about what the program is doing, and this is what's very exciting about the program, is that we're almost replicating what we have found, and a lot of research finds is important to the Latino family, and that's those familial ties.
Exactly.
And when you have, you're playing out a lot of this is a team, this is a family working with you. So normally that we have found is very, very successful in the room with a client.
And your comment about being Caucasian, we've had many of our students have not been ethnically Latino. Some have and some haven't. We've had students from all countries, South America, Puerto Rico, Cuba, everywhere, Mexico, but many of our students aren't. And the other unique part of the training is that they actually have seminars. There's a part of the time where they're having seminars on what are the differences, what are the unique aspects of this particular culture, what do you need to know about this culture. And because they're working with students from many different countries, they learn from each other. And so when they go into the room, they have much more knowledge and therefore more confidence about how to work. And they're not afraid to ask the client too. Because some of the language, even if you're Spanish speaking, there's different words used in different countries.
Well, I was going to say that, because even though you may speak Spanish, but if you're from a different country in South America, these are different cultures. Maybe the same language in many ways.
Yes.
But you're talking about different cultures too, and how do you deal with that? I mean, somebody from Guatemala, for instance, or El Salvador, or Colombia, or whatever. How do you overcome that part of it?
Well, one of the ways we do that is by listening to the language that they use and how they use it, and also by just inquiring during the process of the delivery of the services. And clients appreciate the effort you make in speaking your language, in speaking their language, and so they are very appreciative and will help you when you're not clearly understanding what they're conveying.
It's also empowering. Part of what we're doing is trying to build up the client's own self-confidence to take on their own problems. And when a therapist who they may look up to looks at them and says, "Can you tell me more about your culture and how is it that this action is happening in your family?" the person begins to think of themselves
so it's
as
a lot more interactive.
Yes. How am I an expert? How can if I'm helping this person now, does that put me in a position where I can help my own family later?
Now, what are some of the success stories that you've had? I mean, something that stands in your mind and you think, hey, boy, this is, I need to tell people about, family so-and-so and who've gone through a crisis and we've helped them. And can you share some of those stories?
Well, many have to do with bringing families back together, and where there's been tremendous conflict within the parental system within the parents, and where we've been able to integrate the division that often happens. One of the things you asked about what's unique about working with Latinos, one of the unique things is that we're always looking at how the migration process affected the family relationships, how growing up in his family has also impacted that. So even within families, you have the children going in one direction and the parents in another direction, and that has tremendous implications for the way in which the family relate to one another. And bringing them together and beginning to connect where there's been so much disconnection has been very, very successful and has been very, very moving for all of us.
I remember a story, and it's not the Latino Family Therapy Program, but it typifies, I think, what happens in the work we do, of a counselor who worked out at the probation camp with the young men, and she was at a fair, and as she was walking, she kind of felt like somebody was following her, and she had this sense of this large person behind her, and she was starting to get a little nervous. She turned around, and it was one of the young men she had counseled, who had been at camp, who, after working with her, had gone back to school, had graduated, and was at this fair because he was going to be starting community college. And he stopped to thank her for someone who actually believed in him when everyone else didn't, and was willing to hear how he felt and to see him as a person beyond the infraction that he committed. And I think that's the kind of work that we do.
You know, if I can add another story that I think you know, typifies some of the differences in our training and what that does. I think many times you see clients that if a therapist doesn't understand both culturally and just and doesn't have the sensitivity for what somebody's coming in with, they can misdiagnose someone. You know, and we have one particular client who came in, and at intake we thought, wow, this might be someone that we need to refer to a hospital. It sounds like psychosis. It sounds like, you know, she's hallucinating, delusions. And as we treated her a little bit longer and asked about her background, different things that were happening, it really just stood out that there were a lot of like post-traumatic things from some of it migration, some of it abuse, different things like that. And as we probed further, there was one session where, I mean, it almost seemed like it shifted at that point. The therapist said something, and she was sitting there, and she started to nod her head as he was explaining. It sounds like this happened, that happened, and she said, "You got it."
That's
She
good.
said, "Oh, you got it." After that, before that, if I may add, she used to come in. Her hair was somewhat undone. She'd struggled to get up physically. She looked worn. After that, the following day, her hair was back in a ponytail. She was
And she
dressed
was
differently.
going on different.
She walked up and down the stairs without difficulty from one week to the next.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing all your stories with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Thank you
Jim.
for having us.
Thank you for joining us today. These are folks from the California Family Counseling Center here in Encino. And thank you for watching City of Achievement.
Very nice.